Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we follow lanterns through hollow fog, step where rivers run black, and hear the hum of towers that shouldn't stand. 8 stories from the Appalachian dark, where maps fail, footprints turn back, and the woods remember every name. If this sounds familiar, stay with us. Now hush, the trail is waiting. It was late October when I found the ledger. My name's Grant Fowler, 45, tax assessor for Fayette County. I've been crawling through forgotten cabins and condemned farmhouses for most of my adult life. And nothing ever surprises me anymore. Or at least, that's what I thought. The place was near Lost Creek, past where the road gives up and the woods close in. The cabin should have been empty broken windows, sagging porch, raccoon tracks in the dust, but the book sat dead center on the table, waiting like it had been placed there this morning. The names inside weren't the strange part, it was the dates. All of them were marked for years that haven't happened yet. I told myself it was a prank, maybe some forgotten piece of folk art. But when I turned the page, a black feather slid out and landed at my feet. And then I saw my name. It was written in the same sharp ink as the others. Grant Fowler De Winter. No year, no explanation. Just that single word, do. I closed the ledger, shoved it back onto the table, and told myself it didn't matter. I'd seen enough oddities in these forgotten places, hoarders' journals, children's drawings scrawled on rotten walls, even the occasional taxidermy nightmare someone left behind. This was just another strange thing in a dead man's house. But as I turned toward the door, I noticed something I couldn't explain. Everywhere else in that cabin was coated in years of neglect. But the table where the ledger sat was clean, as if someone had dusted it that very morning. I backed out slowly and drove home without looking in the rearview mirror. I didn't tell anyone about what I found. Not my boss, not my sister, no one. But that night, I dreamed of the ledger. In the dream, I wasn't standing in the cabin anymore. I was standing inside the book. Names stretched across the sky like constellations, each one bound by black threads. And all those threads led toward a single figure in the dark. I couldn't see his face, only the hollow outline of him, tall and thin, like a dead tree stripped bare. He held a single black feather, and though I couldn't hear his voice, I knew he was waiting. When I woke up, I laughed it off as stress. Then I saw the feather on my nightstand. I told myself I wouldn't go back. For 3 days, I tried to focus on my work, convincing myself the cabin and its strange relics were just another eccentric piece of Appalachian folklore. But something kept gnawing at me. The photos. I take pictures of every property I assess. It's part of the job. Yet, when I checked my phone, every image I'd taken of the ledger was gone, replaced by solid black frames, as if the camera had refused to capture it. By the 4th night, I couldn't sleep, against all sense. I got in my truck and drove back out to Lost Creek. Lost Creek is the kind of place that swallows headlights whole. The trees close in too tightly. The road narrows until you're not sure it was ever meant for cars, and the silence feels like it's holding its breath. When I reached the cabin, the air was sharp with cold, and for a long moment, I just stood at the doorway. The ledger was still there, only now. It was open to a page I hadn't seen before. More names, more dates, and at the bottom, in ink so fresh it almost gleamed, was my name again, Grant Fowler, Dewinter. The ink seemed to ripple, as if it hadn't dried. Then I heard it faint. Deliberate, the sound of paper turning, though I hadn't touched a thing. I left without shutting the door. I didn't stop moving until I was back on the road. Hands locked on the wheel, heart hammering. I told myself it was over. I'd burn the place down if I had to. Condemn it. Write it off the county records. But the next morning, I got a call from Carla in records, telling me there was a discrepancy with the Lost Creek audit. She said I hadn't filed my inventory. I told her she was wrong. Then I checked my office files. The report wasn't there. In its place was the ledger, open, waiting. That night, when I came home, there was another feather on my nightstand. Now, there were two. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room with every light on, staring at those two feathers on my nightstand like they might move if I blinked. By morning, I told myself I'd had enough. I drove back to Lost Creek with a plan: burn the cabin, ledger and all, and erase whatever madness had crawled into my life. But when I reached the turnoff, the road wasn't there. I must have circled the ridge for an hour, GPS spinning uselessly, until at last the cabin came into view on a stretch of road I swear didn't exist before. It was waiting for me, and I didn't even question it. The cabin smelled different this time. No mold, no rot, just cold. The ledger was on the table, closed now, as though it had been expecting me. My hands shook as I opened it, and for a moment, I thought I was staring at blank pages. Then the ink bled up from the paper like rising water. Dozens of names I knew. Carla from records, Tom Weaver from the office, even my sister, Emma. All of them followed by the same word, do. At the very bottom, in larger letters than before, was my own name. This time, it had a date. I staggered back and knocked into a chair. That was when I heard the floorboards groan behind me, slow and deliberate. I turned, and there he was, tall, hollow. His shape was almost human, but stretched too far, like someone had pulled him thin across the walls. His face was nothing but paper and ink, shifting and unreadable. He didn't speak, but I felt something press against my chest, a demand without words. I understood then. The ledger wasn't just keeping records. It was collecting. I bolted for the door, but when I stepped outside, I wasn't in Lost Creek anymore. The cabin sat in the middle of a black expanse. No trees, no sky, only a horizon of names written in the air like stars. The hollow man was beside me, closer now, and his head tilted as if to listen. I felt the weight of the feather in my pocket, one I didn't remember taking. My breath fogged, and in the reflection of that ink-black sky, I saw myself holding the ledger. I don't remember leaving. One moment I was staring into that endless dark, and the next I was back in my truck, parked outside my own house. The feathers were gone from my nightstand, but the ledger was sitting on my kitchen table. This time, it wasn't closed. It was open to a fresh page with nothing but a single line written across it. You file what's due, Grant. It's been 3 nights since then. Every morning I wake up to another feather. Every night I hear the sound of paper turning in the dark. I haven't told anyone. I think I know what the ledger wants now, and I'm not sure I have the strength to resist it. Maybe this is how it begins. Maybe this is why no one ever finds the cabin twice, unless it's already too late. I keep the ledger closed most of the time, but sometimes, when the house is quiet and I can hear my own heartbeat, I swear I can feel it breathing. The first time I heard the bell, I thought it was just wind through the trees. My name's Lydia Mercer. I'm 32, a wildlife biologist working a seasonal contract near Black Hollow, West Virginia. I'd been out there for 2 weeks, cataloging animal populations along the old mining trails that snake through the valley. The forest was empty that evening, just me, the crickets, and the sound of my own boots on damp soil. But then came the bell sounding clear, deliberate, and far too close to be an echo from the old church ruins down in their hollow. It rang 3 times, each note sharp enough to make the hairs on my arms rise. By the 4th, it stopped, and the silence afterward felt heavier than the sound. I radioed back to camp, but no one else had heard it. They told me I was tired, probably mixing sounds from the hills, and I almost believed them. But the next night, it came again. This time, I was closer to the source, an old ridge, where the trees knot together so tightly they blot out the sky. I found no tracks, no scat, not even a scrap of disturbed ground, just an old iron bell, cracked straight down the middle, hanging from a tree like someone had carried it there and left it. I couldn't explain why, but I didn't touch it. There was something about the way it swayed in the still air, moving when there was no wind. That made my stomach turn. By the 3rd night, I stopped pretending it wasn't real. The bell rang again, always at dusk, and each time it did, I saw less wildlife. The woods were going quiet, as if every living thing in Black Hollow was retreating deeper into the dark. I found reversed tracks in the mud one morning, deer prints leading back the way they'd come, perfectly mirrored, like they'd walked backward. I showed the photos to one of the rangers, and he just frowned and told me, "Stay clear of the bell, that's not for us." I asked him what he meant, but he just walked away. On the 4th night, I couldn't help myself. I hiked back to the ridge, flashlight in hand, determined to prove this was just some strange phenomenon I could explain. But when I reached the bell, it wasn't cracked anymore. It hung there whole, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. And as I stared at it, I realized I could hear faint whispers beneath the metal's hum. I don't remember leaning in, but suddenly I was close enough to see the reflection in the bell's surface, and it wasn't mine. I stumbled back from the bell, my breath sharp and uneven. The reflection had been wrong too tall, its face blurred like wet ink, but its eyes had been clear and fixed directly on me. I swung my flashlight around, but there was nothing there, only the bell swaying in that windless air. I should have left then, but something in me refused to turn away. It wasn't just curiosity. It felt like the bell was holding me in place, the way a snake fixes a bird before the strike. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the swaying stopped, and the forest exhaled around me like it had been holding its breath. The next morning, I found another set of reversed tracks, only this time, they were human, bare feet, small, maybe a child's, but they led backward from the ridge toward the hollow. I followed them until they vanished in a patch of dead leaves, as if the ground had simply refused to take another step. When I got back to camp, one of the older rangers, Dale was waiting for me. He didn't ask what I'd seen, he just looked at the dirt on my boots and shook his head. "Don't stay past dusk," he said, voice flat. "If you hear it again, don't answer it." I wanted to ask him what that meant, but I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. That night, I stayed in my tent, but it didn't matter. The bell rang anyway, closer this time, the sound rolling down from the ridge like it was calling my name. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it wasn't just in the air, it was inside my chest, vibrating through my bones. When it stopped, I opened my eyes and saw a feather lying just inside, on my tent flap. It was pale, almost translucent, and cold to the touch. I didn't sleep at all. By dawn, I knew I had to end this. I didn't believe in curses, but I believed in patterns. And Black Hollow was emptying itself for a reason. I went back to the ridge at first light. The bell was waiting, motionless, and I forced myself to lay my hand against it. It was warm, pulsing faintly like the skin of some living thing. And for a heartbeat, I swore I heard my own voice whisper from inside the metal. The sound wasn't begging or frightened. It was calm, resigned, and it said only one thing new. I tore my hand away and stumbled back. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. There were footprints around the bell now, dozens of them, circling it in uneven rings, some fresh, some impossibly old, all of them backward. I don't remember the hike back to camp. I just remember Dale waiting for me at the edge of the trees. His face grim. He didn't say a word, just held up a small leather pouch and pressed it into my hand. Inside was a crude iron nail, dark with rust. "If it rings again," he told me quietly, "drive it into the ground and walk away. Don't look back." That night, I sat in my tent, clutching the nail, and waited for dusk. The bell rang again, low and deep, like it was buried beneath the earth. My hands shook as I drove the nail into the ground, the sound of iron on rock sharp enough to split the night. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air shifted, and the bell's glow bled out of the trees like smoke retreating from a fire. The whispers that had been circling my tent went silent. I thought it was over until I heard footsteps, slow and dragging, just beyond the ridge. They didn't fade. They circled. When dawn came, the nail was gone, the earth smooth where I'd struck it. I packed my gear and left Black Hollow that morning without looking back. Even now, miles away, I sometimes hear it one soft chime at dusk, like a reminder that I only delayed something, not stopped it. And every time, I wonder if I should have let it take me because I don't think it likes being cheated. I came to Miller's Gap looking for silence, but I found the lantern instead. My name's Aaron Pike, 35, former EMT turned caretaker for the old ranger station that squats just shy of the Kentucky line. After the kind of year I'd had too many calls, too many nights filled with sirens, I thought a season of quiet work in the mountains might help put my head back together. But on my second night, while checking the fence line, near the tree line, I saw it, a lone lantern burning in the distance. No one was supposed to be out here, not this deep in the restricted area. Yet it swayed gently, a pale orange glow floating between the black pines like it was waiting for me to follow. I didn't. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe some leftover equipment from the old mining crews, or a reflection from a cabin farther down the ridge. But the next night, it was there again, closer this time, and I noticed something wrong about it. Lanterns flicker. This one didn't. It burned with the same steady flame, a perfect circle of light, too sharp and too clean to be real. I radioed it in, but the ranger on duty only laughed and told me not to wander after dark. Not unless you want to walk yourself right out of this world, he said. I didn't laugh. The third night, I dreamed of the lantern. In the dream, I followed it through the trees, past broken fences and deadfall, until I reached a clearing I didn't recognize. There were others there, standing in the circle of its glow, silent, unmoving shapes holding their own lanterns, each one burning the same unbroken flame. I woke with my boots muddy and pine needles in my sheets. I told myself I must have wandered sleepwalking, but I couldn't explain the print of a hand too long, too thin pressed into the condensation on my window. By the fourth night, I gave up pretending. I packed my flashlight, a map, and a compass, then waited for the lantern. Right on time. It bloomed between the trees, still steady, still too bright. This time, I stepped off the porch and followed it. Every few yards, it would vanish, only to reappear just far enough ahead to keep me moving. I checked my compass twice. Each time the needle spun, useless, pointing nowhere. Still, I kept walking. The forest felt wrong the deeper I went. The air was still, heavy, as if the trees themselves were leaning in to listen. I don't know how long I followed that glow, but eventually I reached a clearing. In the center stood an old post hammered into the ground, and from it hung the lantern unmoving, perfect and impossibly bright. Underneath it was a single boot print, reversed. I crouched beside the post, staring at the boot print beneath the lantern. It was mine. Same tread, same worn-down heel, but reversed as if I'd walked out of the ground instead of toward it. The lantern's glow didn't waver, but the shadows it cast moved on their own, stretching in directions that didn't match the trees. I told myself to turn around, to go back, but the air felt thick, like it was holding me there. Then I heard its footsteps circling just outside the light, slow and deliberate, too many for one person. I called out, but the sound of my voice fell flat, swallowed before it could carry. That's when I saw them. Shapes in the tree line, tall and crooked, their outlines bending like heat haze. Each held a lantern identical to the one before me, their flame steady and soundless. One of them stepped closer, and for a second, I thought I saw its face. It wasn't a face at all, just a pale oval marked with a single line down the center, like a seam waiting to be opened. The lantern above the post flared, brighter than before, and for a moment, I thought it wanted me to take it. I don't remember deciding to move, but I reached for it. My fingers brushed the handle, and the world shifted. The clearing stretched out into darkness without end. The figures in the trees stepping closer with every blink. Their lanterns didn't cast light, they ate it, peeling the edges of the world away until only the glow above me remained. I yanked my hand back and stumbled, my boot landing inside the reversed print. That was when the air split with a sound like metal striking stone, and all the other lanterns went out at once. When I woke, I was lying on the porch of the ranger station. My boots were caked with mud, my flashlight gone. The map I'd brought was folded neatly beside me, and in its center was a burn mark in the shape of that lantern's handle. I told myself it was just a dream, but the compass I'd carried with me hasn't worked since. Its needle spins whenever I get near the tree line, and sometimes, late at night, I see that same steady glow moving through the forest, closer than it should be. I haven't followed it again, but I keep a lantern by my door now, one of my own, and I light it every night. I don't know if it keeps the others away, or if it just lets them know I can still see them. Either way, I've stopped sleeping. Because if the light ever goes out, I think I'll see what's waiting in the dark. They told me about the stones before I ever set foot in Briar Fork. My name's Nathan Cole, 29. A surveyor brought in to chart new property lines along the edge of the old coal town. The locals warned me in their quiet way, not with threats, just with that peculiar Appalachian stillness that says more than words ever could. If you see him counting. One man muttered at the gas station, "Don't interrupt." I laughed it off at the time. That was before I saw the stones. The first marker was a stack of river rocks, 7 high, balanced so precisely it looked impossible. I found it on the second day, deep in the woods where no trail should have been. A mile later, I saw another, this one 9 high. The third stack was 11, always an odd number. I took photos, sent them to my supervisor, and got a curt reply. Ignore it. Locals and their games. But something in me couldn't. I'd worked remote sites for years, and I knew what people could build. These weren't built, they were placed. That night, I dreamed of a man standing in the woods, pale and long-limbed. His back turned as he counted stones in a low, steady voice. I couldn't hear the numbers, but every time his hand moved, another stack appeared in the trees around him. I woke up with the echo of that rhythm still in my head. 1, pause, 2, pause, as if it had followed me back from sleep. By morning, there was a new stack of stones just outside my tent. 5 high. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe one of the other surveyors trying to get in my head. But that afternoon, when I met with the crew, none of them would meet my eyes. One man, older than the rest, muttered something under his breath before walking away. If you hear him counting, don't count with him. I didn't ask what he meant. By the 4th day, I was 30 yards from the state line, deep in unmarked territory, when I found the largest stack, yet 13 stones, each the size of a man's skull. Beside it, half buried in the earth, was a rusted compass. When I picked it up, its needle didn't point north, it pointed directly at the stack. I should have left the compass where I found it, but I didn't. The weight of it felt wrong in my hand, heavier than rust and iron ought to be. I slipped it into my pocket and turned away from the stack of stones, but not before I noticed something else, a second set of footprints. They circled the stones, pressed deep into the soil. But they didn't lead away. They simply stopped, as if the ground had swallowed whoever made them. That night, I couldn't sleep. The woods were quiet, too quiet for the Appalachians in spring. Not a single whip-poor-will, no distant bark of a fox, not even the sigh of wind through the pines. Just silence and then Faintly, the sound of counting. 1, a pause. 2, a pause. Low and steady, like breath drawn through the trees. I sat up, every nerve in me on edge. And for a reason I still don't understand. I whispered the next number. 3. The sound stopped. The silence after was worse than the counting. I held my breath, heart hammering. And then I heard movement outside my tent slow, deliberate steps circling in the dirt. I didn't look. God help me. I couldn't. Instead, I clenched my fists and stayed very still until the sound faded. When dawn broke, there was a new stack of stones just 20 feet away, 5 high, casting a long shadow that pointed directly at my tent. By midday, I'd decided to hike out. My maps didn't match the terrain anymore. The trails twisted and forked in places that shouldn't exist. I turned on my GPS, but it only showed a blank screen, as if I'd walked past the edge of anything real. Still, I walked for hours, no matter which direction I chose. I ended up back at the 13-stone stack. It was there, waiting for me. And this time, so was he. The man was taller than I'd imagined, his shoulders sharp under a threadbare coat that hung too long on his frame. His face. I wish I could say it was wrong, but that would imply it had a face at all. Instead, there was only smooth, pale skin stretched where features should have been. He was crouched over the stones, one hand moving in slow, deliberate motions as he counted in that same low rhythm. 1, pause. 2, pause. Each number felt heavier than the last, pressing into the air like a weight. I should have run. Instead, I asked him, "What are you counting?" He stopped. His head turned not towards me, but toward the sound of my voice, as if he didn't see so much as feel me there. His hand rose, trembling slightly, and pointed at the compass in my pocket. I didn't know why, but I pulled it out. The needle spun wildly before stopping not on north, but on him. Then he spoke. 14. A sound like stone grinding on stone rolled through the forest. And another stack of rocks erupted from the ground beside him, perfectly balanced, as if it had always been there. My stomach turned cold. I didn't wait to see what came next. I ran, crashing through the trees, branches clawing at my arms. I didn't stop until I reached the ridge and saw the lights of Briar Fork below. When I stumbled into the gas station that night, covered in mud and shaking, the old man behind the counter didn't look surprised. He just handed me a chipped mug of coffee and said, "You counted with him, didn't you?" I couldn't answer. He nodded like he already knew. "They all do," he said. "That's how he keeps track." I left Briar Fork the next morning, but I didn't take the compass with me. I buried it beneath a cairn of my own, 7 stones high, and prayed it would be enough. For a while, I thought it worked. No counting, no dreams. But 3 nights ago, I woke to find a stack of stones in my backyard. Just 3. And last night, I heard him again. 1, pause. 2, pause. The rhythm hasn't changed, but I think I know what happens when he reaches 14. Tonight, I'm not sleeping. I've locked every door, every window, but I can still hear him, counting closer. It was supposed to be a quick hike. My name's Elise Warren, 31. and I'd driven to the base of Chally Beat Ridge to clear my head after the kind of week that makes you think silence might be the only cure. The trail was narrow but familiar, one I'd walked a dozen times growing up. Only this time, it felt different. The air had a weight to it, like stepping into a room where someone had just been arguing. By the third mile, I noticed the forest had gone still. No birds, no wind. Not even the crunch of my boots seemed to belong to me anymore. That's when I heard a faint, metallic hum coming from somewhere ahead, rhythmic and low, almost like the turning of gears buried underground. I told myself it was nothing, a piece of old mining equipment maybe, but the sound didn't fade. It followed. I came to a clearing I didn't remember. In the center stood a stone arch, no taller than a man, draped with moss and carved with lines too precise to be natural. At its base was an old pocket watch, its glass cracked, but the second hand ticking backward. I reached for it before I could think better of it, and the moment my fingers touched the metal, the hum stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was expectant. I turned, ready to leave, but the trail behind me wasn't there anymore. In its place was a stretch of forest I didn't recognize, trees older, twisted, leaning toward the arch as if listening. I checked my phone. No signal. My compass spun once and then froze, needle pointing straight at the arch. I told myself to breathe, to keep calm, but every step I took only brought me back to the same clearing. It was impossible. I marked my path, scratched a tree, even left my water bottle as a sign. But I'd circle and find it sitting there, untouched, and each time, the watch at the base of the arch ticked faster. By the fourth loop, the sun hadn't moved. I couldn't tell if it was morning or evening anymore. That's when I saw the figure. He was standing just beyond the arch, tall and narrow, his face hidden beneath the brim of a hat that didn't belong in this century. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there as though he'd been waiting for me. And though I couldn't see his eyes, I knew he was watching. "Do you know what time it is?" The voice was thin and dry, as if the words had been left in the air for too long before reaching me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He raised one long finger and pointed at the watch. Then he smiled. An awful small thing that stretched farther than it should have and vanished like a shadow swallowed by the dark. I should have run instead. I picked up the watch. It was ice cold. But the moment I held it, I could hear the hum again. Only now, it wasn't beneath the ground. It was inside my head. I don't remember leaving the clearing. One moment I was staring at the arch, and the next I was standing on the trail again. My water bottle gone, my scratch marks missing, and the sky still locked in the same pale, endless dusk in my hand. The watch ticked backward, faster and faster, until the sound was all I could hear. When I reached the trailhead at last, it was night. My car was there, but the clock on the dashboard read 7:14, the same minute, over and over. No matter how long I sat and stared at it. I drove home anyway, thinking maybe sleep would fix it. But it didn't. The clock on my wall is frozen at 7:14. My phone, my laptop, every screen reads the same. And sometimes, just before the hum starts. I catch a glimpse of him in the reflection of the glass, standing just behind me, smiling like he's been counting down to something I can't stop. For 3 nights, I didn't sleep. The watch never stopped ticking backward, its hands whirling faster with every hour. Though no time passed anywhere else, it stayed 7:14 on my clocks, on my phone, even on the microwave. I started to hear the hum more clearly now, a constant vibration under my skin, like my bones were tuning forks. And every time it grew louder, I'd see him again. In the mirror, in the window, always just behind me, smiling. By the 4th night, I realized something. He only appeared when I stared at the watch. The longer I looked, the clearer he became, until I could almost hear him breathing. His voice came next, dry and hollow. Almost time. I tried to get rid of it. I drove out to the ridge, hiked back to that cursed clearing, and hurled the watch into the trees. I didn't wait to hear it land. I just ran. But when I got home, it was sitting on my kitchen table, ticking backward, its glass unbroken, waiting. I called my sister, told her everything, begged her to come over. She laughed at first, thought I was joking, but when she arrived and saw every clock in the house frozen at 7:14, she didn't laugh again. We both heard the hum then. It rattled the walls. "Elise," she whispered, "what did you do?" Before I could answer, the lights flickered and the room stretched. Not physically, but in a way I can't explain, like the air folded and time bent in on itself. And then, he was standing in the doorway, hat low, smile too wide. He didn't move toward me. He didn't need to. The hum pressed against my skull until I thought my teeth would crack. "0," he said. The watch stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the hum. My sister grabbed my arm, but when I looked at her, her mouth was moving too slow, like she was trapped in syrup. The world dragged. Every sound stretched and warped. I could see my own breath hanging in the air, unmoving, as if time itself had been pinned in place. And in that impossible stillness, he walked toward me. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. He leaned close, his face inches from mine, and I finally saw his eyes' empty sockets filled with turning gears, grinding endlessly. "You borrowed the hour," he whispered. "Now I take it back." When I blinked, he was gone. The clocks ticked again. My sister was crying, and the watch was gone. I should feel relieved, but I'm not. Because it's 7:15 now. Finally. And I can't stop wondering what happens when it reaches 7:16. My name's Daniel Pike, 34, a trail guide out of Hemlock Gap. And I've heard every kind of story these mountains can give you. But nothing stuck with me like the one about the whistler. Folks around here say if you hear it once, you keep walking. Twice, you run. 3 times. Well, nobody's ever heard it 3 times and come back. I used to think it was just one of those old backwoods warnings people tell to keep kids out of the hollers. Then, late last fall, I heard it for myself. It was a clear night, cold enough that the frost on the ground cracked under my boots. I was guiding a pair of campers down from High Spire Ridge after their lantern failed. They were nervous city types, the kind who jump at every rustle of leaves. I kept the mood light, cracked a few jokes, until somewhere past the switchback trail, I heard it. A single, low whistle from the dark. Not a bird, not the wind. Too steady for either. I froze. The campers didn't notice at first. They were too busy fumbling with their gear, but I knew. I'd heard the stories all my life. But hearing it there, in the black heart of those woods, was different. It sounded close, too close. I didn't say a word, just picked up the pace and told the others to keep moving. We didn't get far before it came again. The second whistle. This time, the sound carried thin, sharp, and high enough to thread between the trees like it was searching for us. The campers laughed nervously, asking if it was an owl. I told them to keep their eyes forward and their mouths shut. My heart was pounding, but my feet didn't stop moving. That's when we found the first marker, a length of rope tied between two trees, knotted into a loop. No trail crew left that there. I cut it down without thinking and shoved it into my pack. But when I turned back, I saw a second loop hanging farther down the path. And then another. The third one had something dangling from it. A small wooden whistle, carved with spirals too precise for a knife made by hand. When I touched it, the trees around us seemed to lean closer. I told the campers to run. They didn't argue. But the third whistle came anyway. It didn't sound from behind us, it came from ahead. And in that moment, I realized we were no longer on any trail I recognized. The switchback was gone, replaced by a straight path lined with more ropes and more hanging whistles, each one swaying though there wasn't any wind. The campers grabbed my arms, begging to turn back, but I couldn't find where back was anymore. The woods had gone wrong, and somewhere in the dark, between the trees, something was whistling just for us. I don't remember choosing to follow it. One step, then another, and the sound pulled us deeper, weaving through the trees like a thread through cloth. The campers clung to me, trembling, their breath sharp in the cold, but the whistle was steady, patient. Each note slid into the next, rising and falling, not quite a melody, not quite a warning, just enough to keep my legs moving. We passed more ropes, dozens of them. Some were frayed and broken, some knotted into shapes I didn't recognize. But every single one had a whistle dangling at its end. When I glanced back, I saw the campers' faces drained of color. They didn't speak. Maybe they couldn't. I knew then we weren't just lost. We'd stepped onto a trail that wasn't ours anymore. The third whistle came again, closer this time. And the path opened onto a clearing I'd never seen before. At the center stood a crooked wooden frame like the outline of a door, but without walls or hinges. Ropes hung from it, swaying in perfect rhythm with the whistling. Though the air around us was dead still, something moved just beyond it. At first, I thought it was a man tall, thin, head bowed, but as it turned, I saw it wasn't a man at all. Its limbs were jointed wrong, bending where they shouldn't. Its mouth, nothing but a hollow split that stretched from ear to ear. It raised one finger to its lip, as if to hush me, and the whistling stopped. The silence was worse than the sound. I gripped the camper's arms and forced us backward, step by step. But the ropes behind us had changed. Now they crossed the trees like a net, tangling the woods into a maze that hadn't been there before. Then, from the clearing, the thing started to whistle again, but this time, it wasn't one note. It was 3, 4, 5, overlapping, surrounding us from every direction, pulling the air tight around my throat. I grabbed the nearest whistle hanging from a rope and blew into it. The sound cracked the night like breaking glass. The woods shuddered. The rope snapped loose and fell. And for 1 second, I saw the creature flinch, its long head jerking as though I'd struck it. I didn't wait for a second chance. I dragged the campers with me, running blind, branches clawing our faces, until I saw the familiar bend of the switchback trail. When we stumbled onto it, the whistling stopped. The ropes were gone. We didn't speak on the way down. The campers left town that same night. I can't blame them. But here's the thing. I kept the whistle I blew. I didn't mean to. I just found it in my pack when I got home. And sometimes, late at night, I swear it hums in my hand, soft and low, like it's waiting for me to bring it back. My name's Maggie Holt. I'm 29, and I run a small photography business out of Boone. Most of my jobs are weddings and graduations, but every now and then, I take on a freelance assignment for a local magazine. That's how I ended up in Deepwater Hollow, hired to photograph what the editor called the last uncharted trail in the region. He didn't tell me why it was uncharted. He didn't have to. Folks around here avoid it. And the few who talk about it say one thing: if you see a lantern swinging in the trees, turn around. I didn't believe it. Not really. I told myself it was another campfire story meant to keep hikers from wandering too far. The first mile of the hollow was nothing but dense pines and slick mud. The kind of place you expect to find boot prints, beer cans, and nothing else. But as I moved deeper, the air grew heavy, damp in a way that made every breath taste like rust. Then I saw it. A lantern, just ahead, hanging from a low branch. Its light wasn't warm like a candle or harsh like an LED. It was pale, almost silver, and it didn't flicker. I raised my camera, half thinking it was a leftover prop from some forgotten search party, but through the lens, the lantern was gone. I lowered the camera. There it was again. I should have left. I know that now. But I told myself I could get one good shot. I stepped closer, and the mud beneath me didn't squelch. It cracked, dry as bone, though I could still see the wet ground behind me. I took another step, and another, until the air felt so thin I could barely breathe. The lantern moved. It didn't swing like something pushed by wind. It drifted, slow, steady, deeper into the trees. I followed, because some part of me stubborn or foolish. I still don't know which was certain I'd find whoever hung it there, but the deeper I went, the stranger it became. The trees stretched taller, their trunks splitting in ways that made no sense, branches twisting like ropes. I passed a tree with a carving in it, 3 vertical lines crossed by a single horizontal slash. Fresh, deep. My gut turned, but I kept walking. Then I heard the water. A river cut through the hollow, black as oil and silent as stone. The lantern hovered on the opposite bank. its glow reflecting across the surface without bending or rippling. And next to it, I saw footprints bare, human, but leading straight into the water. That was when I realized the lantern wasn't guiding me. It was luring me. I stood at the river's edge, breath clouding in the cold air, staring at that pale light. It didn't sway or dim. It waited. The footprints in the mud were small, too small for an adult, but deep enough to suggest whoever left them didn't hesitate before stepping into that black water. I should have turned back, but I'd come too far. My camera hung at my side, useless, and all I could think about was that lantern and the quiet pull it had on me. The first step into the river was like plunging my foot into ice. The second felt worse. By the time I was waist deep, my legs had gone numb, but the lantern was closer now, its glow cutting through the fog that had risen like a curtain around me. Then I noticed something wrong. There was no reflection of myself in the water, only the lantern's glow. I reached the other side and hauled myself onto the bank, my hands sinking into soil that felt dry and warm, like it hadn't known rain in a century. The footprints continued ahead, weaving between trees that bent toward me as if listening. I followed them. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though I were walking downhill even when the ground stayed flat. The lantern stopped at the base of a massive oak. Its bark was split wide, hollow in the middle, like a door waiting to be opened. And inside that hollow, I saw her. A girl, no older than 10, barefoot, her skin pale as the lantern light. She didn't move, didn't blink, just lifted one hand, pointing at me before curling her fingers into a silent beckon. I should have run. God help me, I should have run. But I stepped closer. The world behind me fell away. The sound of the river vanished. The trees stilled. I felt like I'd crossed into a place that wasn't part of any map, a place held together by silence and that impossible glow. The girl tilted her head and opened her mouth. No sound came out, but the lantern swung for the first time once, twice until its light struck the hollow of the oak. There, carved deep into the wood, was the same mark I'd seen before, 3 vertical lines, crossed by one slash. Only now I could see more of it, twisting downward into symbols I didn't recognize. Then the ground beneath me trembled. The lantern flared bright, and I heard it a low, mournful hum, like wind through a cave. The girl stepped backward into the hollow, her small frame vanishing into darkness that should not have been there. I reached out, almost without meaning to, and just as my hand brushed the bark, the lantern went out. When I woke, I was back at the trailhead. My clothes were dry. My camera was gone. But hanging from my wrist was the lantern, cold and dead, its glass unbroken. I've tried throwing it away. I've buried it. I've even left it at the riverbank. Every morning, it's back, waiting by my bed. And sometimes, in the black hour before dawn, I see that pale light glowing from inside the glass, just bright enough to outline a small hand pressed against the inside. My name's Caleb Wright, 42, and I've worked maintenance for the Blue Hollow Overlook for nearly 2 decades. It's quiet work, patching fences, clearing fallen branches, keeping tourists from wandering too far. Most nights, It's just me and the sound of wind cutting through the ridges. But last winter, during a cold snap that turned the mountains white and silent, I saw something I still can't explain. It started with a fog. Not the usual kind that rolls in low and thin. It came heavy, swallowing everything past arm's reach. I'd gone up to check the overlook trail after a storm, flashlight in one hand, thermos in the other. I'd walked that path 100 times, but that night it felt different. My boots didn't echo the way they should have. Even the birds had gone quiet. Then I saw him. At first, I thought it was a lost hiker, a man standing in the fog just beyond the split in the trail, tall, coat too thin for the cold, hands hanging loose at his sides. I called out, but he didn't answer, didn't even move. My light hit him, and for a second, it looked like he was smiling, but the fog slid between us before I could be sure. I should have left it at that, but I stepped closer, calling again, my voice strange and flat in the muffled air. The man turned, just slightly. And that's when I noticed it. He didn't have footprints. The snow around him was untouched. I froze. Every instinct I had told me to turn back. But then he lifted his arm slow and deliberate and pointed down the unmarked trail. The one locals call the way that doesn't come back. I told myself it was a trick of the fog, a shadow, but I followed anyway. The deeper I went, the colder it got. The trees leaned inward, their branches bare and clawing. The man moved ahead of me, always just far enough that I couldn't see his face. Once, I lost sight of him completely, and when the fog shifted, he was standing closer, too close, like he'd been waiting for me. Then I heard it, a low hum, almost mechanical, coming from somewhere deep in the fog. My compass spun in my pocket. My flashlight flickered, and for the first time in years, I felt real fear in those woods. Because that's when I realized I hadn't seen the overlook gate for a long, long time. I don't know how long I'd been walking. The fog had swallowed the world, and the hum grew louder with every step, vibrating through my boots and into my bones. The man was still ahead of me, no more than a pale shape in the shifting gray, but I couldn't tell if he was leading me or just making sure I didn't turn back. My breath came out in ragged bursts, the air sharp with cold, and my flashlight dimmed until it was nothing more than a faint glow. That's when I realized something that made my stomach twist. There were no trees anymore. The trail hadn't changed beneath my feet, but the forest was gone. I stood in a vast white void where fog replaced everything else, and the hum became a steady drone, like 1,000 voices murmuring just beneath the threshold of hearing. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. Then, without warning, the man stopped. He turned toward me for the first time. I saw his face clearly. His skin was pale, not the color of frostbite, but paper thin, stretched over sharp bones. His eyes were pits, deep and dark, and his smile was far too wide. He didn't speak. He only raised one hand, palm outward, as if to warn me. Then he stepped backward into the fog and vanished. In his place, the hum split open into a sound I can barely describe, like tearing metal and a choir singing in reverse. The fog thinned just enough to reveal something ahead, a black shape, massive and crooked, rising out of the mist. It looked like an old watchtower, its wood rotted, its beams leaning at impossible angles. Lanterns hung from the railings, swinging without wind, their light cold and colorless. I should have run. Instead, I climbed. Each step up the tower groaned under my weight. But I couldn't stop myself. Halfway up, I glanced down. There were no footprints in the snow below mine or his. The hum had quieted now, replaced by a hollow stillness that pressed against my skull like a second heartbeat. At the top, I found a bell, rusted, cracked, but still hanging from its frame. There was a rope tied to it, frayed and damp, and carved into the wood beside it was a phrase, over and over, if you ring it, you stay. I didn't touch it. God help me, I almost did. But something instinct or fear pulled me back. I turned and ran down the steps, the fog clutching at my arms, the hum rising again like it was angry. When I finally stumbled onto the main trail, the world snapped back. The trees were there, the snow, the overlook gate, and him. The man stood at the edge of the fog, his head tilted as if he were waiting. Then he raised one hand and pressed a single finger to his lips. I blinked and he was gone. I don't go near the overlook anymore. But some nights, when the fog rolls in thick, I swear I hear the hum again. And if I listen long enough, I can hear the bell too faint, distant, and ringing like someone finally pulled the rope. I was 33 the first time I found the door. I'd been working as a surveyor for the state for almost a decade, but Pine Hollow was different, untouched, unmarked, and the kind of place even old maps didn't bother with. Most people stayed out of it. Too many steep ridges, too many dead ends, too many stories about hunters who didn't come back. I figured it was just bad luck or bad footing, until I saw it. The door was standing in the middle of a clearing, framed by nothing but pine needles and fog. No walls, no hinges sunk into the earth. Just a weathered oak door, its surface carved with symbols I didn't recognize, loops, crosses, and jagged lines that looked almost burned into the wood. I thought it was some kind of art piece, maybe an old prank. But when I wrapped my hand around the iron handle, I nearly yanked it back. It was cold, not winter cold, grave cold. I pulled out my GPS and logged the coordinates, but the signal stuttered and vanished, as if the clearing didn't exist. I swore under my breath, checked my compass, and felt my stomach drop. The needle spun in lazy circles, refusing to settle. I knew I should have turned back right then, but curiosity got the better of me. I pushed the door open. It didn't creak. It didn't resist. It simply swung wide, revealing the same trees beyond it, only different. The air was heavy, and every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a crow felt slow, drawn out like a warped record. I stepped through. My boot landed on soft moss, and the moment I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. When I turned, it wasn't there anymore. For a long moment, I stood still, listening. The woods around me were wrong. The trees were older, their trunks massive and split with age. The sky above had gone pale, a color I couldn't name. And somewhere in the distance, faint but steady, I heard the sound of a bell. Not ringing like a church bell, but tolling, deep and hollow, over and over again. I should have run, but I didn't. I marked a tree with my knife and started walking, figuring I'd circle back if things got strange. But after 10 minutes, I passed the same tree again, same mark, same bark split. I tried a different direction, same result. The clearing wouldn't let me out. That's when I saw it again. The door. Only this time, it wasn't in the clearing. It stood between two massive pines, closer than it should have been, like it had moved. I approached carefully, my boots crunching over dead leaves. Something was nailed into the trunk next to it, a brass key, old and tarnished, with one thing carved above it, my initials. I didn't touch it. Not then. I just stared, my breath hanging in the air. And for the first time, I realized I was losing track of time. My watch was still ticking. But the second hand jerked forward in uneven skips. That low, steady bell kept ringing. When I finally stepped back through the door, the world snapped like a rubber band. My compass straightened. My GPS lit up. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. But when I checked my phone, 3 hours had passed since I'd first walked into Pine Hollow. I'd only been gone 10 minutes. I told myself I'd log it as an equipment malfunction and forget it ever happened. But that night, I dreamed of the door, and when I woke, I swear I heard the bell, faint and patient, somewhere in the distance. I didn't want to go back. For 3 nights, I heard the bell in my dreams, low and hollow, the sound vibrating through the walls of my cabin. I tried ignoring it, but every morning, I found new pine needles on my floor, though I'd locked every door and window. On the 4th night, I woke to something worse. The door was there, standing in the corner of my bedroom, freestanding, the brass key nailed to it. The hum of the bell was louder now, close enough that it felt like it was coming from inside my skull. By dawn, it was gone. But I knew then I didn't have a choice. I packed my gear and hiked straight back into Pine Hollow. No GPS this time, didn't need it. The fog was waiting, thick as breath, curling low around the trees. And there it was, the door, in the same clearing, its wood slick with dew, its symbols darker than I remembered. The key was nailed to the same tree. But this time, I didn't hesitate. I tore it free. The lock clicked the moment I slid it in. And the sound was wrong, too loud, like it didn't just echo in the clearing, but in my chest. The door opened on its own, and beyond it wasn't the woods. I stood at the edge of a street lined with houses, every window boarded shut. The sky was the same pale shade I'd seen before, drained of color, the sun a dim white disk. I should have run. I didn't. I stepped through, and the door closed behind me. The air was still, silent, no wind, no birds. Not even my own breath seemed to carry. I walked past the houses, and that's when I saw them names carved into every door frame. Some repeated 2, even 3 times. One of them was mine. My stomach dropped. I turned back toward where the door should have been. It wasn't there anymore. Then the bell rang. Close now. Close enough that it rattled the boards on the houses. A window creaked open, just a sliver, and a pale hand gripped the frame. Not waving, not beckoning, just holding on. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. But then I saw movement in every house. Shadows leaning against the windows, faces I couldn't fully see. All turned towards me. I bolted. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually, I saw the door again standing alone, waiting. The key was in my hand, though I never remembered picking it up. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I opened it, stepped through, and slammed it behind me. When I came to, I was lying in the clearing, the door shut and locked. The key was gone. My compass pointed true again. But something was different. The air was wrong, too still, too heavy, and when I looked at my watch, 2 whole days were missing. That was a week ago. Since then, the door hasn't come back. But I think it will. Because last night, I found a new carving on the wall of my cabin, right above my bed, my name etched deep. And below it, a single word, written in a hand that wasn't mine, stay.